Early life in ancient times. In the earliest chapters of human history, when the world was still young and the footprints of mankind were few, a child was born who would later become a symbol of wisdom, discipline, and heavenly honor. His name was Idris, known to the ancient people as a man who carried himself with a quiet strength, a calm intelligence, and a heart that felt deeply for the broken world around him. Life in those ancient days was simple but fragile. Tribes lived close to nature, the sky felt nearer, and every sunrise looked like a fresh reminder of God's mercy. Yet beneath that simplicity, humanity was already slipping. People had begun drifting away from the guidance once given to them. Through their forefather, Adam, ignorance was spreading, desires were growing wild, and darkness was settling into places where purity once lived. From childhood, Idris saw this shift clearer than anyone around him. While others followed customs blindly, he asked questions quietly, observing the world with a maturity far beyond his age. Those who watched him noticed something unusual. He rarely wasted a moment. As a boy, he helped his family with a level of responsibility that made elders smile. At night, when most children slept, Idris would sit outside under the vast sky, staring upward as if searching for some hidden truth written among the stars. He grew up hearing stories of Adam, the first man, the first prophet, the one who spoke directly with his creator. These stories carved a deep respect inside him, a longing to revive the forgotten purity of early mankind. People around him sensed a kind of light in him, a clarity that made them trust his words even before he ever preached. And while the world around him slowly drowned in corruption, Idris nurtured something completely opposite inside himself: discipline, faith, and unshakable morality. There were moments when he watched men cheat one another, lie for comfort, or chase desires without shame. Each time, his heart tightened. He knew these behaviors weren't random, they were symptoms of a world slowly drifting away from truth. Idris felt this decline not as an observer, but as someone chosen to correct it. Even before he received revelation, he lived with a quiet sense of mission, as though his soul already knew that one day he would stand against the rising darkness and remind humanity of the path they were losing. The first prophet after Adam. As Idris stepped into adulthood, his inner clarity only grew stronger. He lived in a generation not far from Adam himself, a time when humanity still remembered the origins of their creation, yet somehow they were drifting away from it faster than anyone expected. It was in these crucial years that Idris was chosen by God, raised to the noble rank of prophethood, becoming the very first prophet after Adam. This responsibility didn't arrive with thunder or spectacle. It came quietly, like truth often does, settling into the heart of a man pure enough to carry it. From the moment divine guidance touched him, Idris began seeing the world differently. Every action of the people around him, every lie, every injustice, every moment of arrogance felt heavier, almost painful. He knew these weren't just bad habits. They were the early cracks in humanity's moral foundation. If left uncorrected, these cracks would eventually split societies apart. And so, with a voice balanced between firmness and compassion, Idris began calling his people back to the truth that had nearly faded from their lives. Unlike many prophets who came later, Idris lived among people who still had memories, reminders, passed down from Adam and his sons. Yet generations had added layers of laziness, desires, and excuses over those memories. They believed in God, yes, but belief without discipline had become a hollow shell. Idris understood this better than anyone. So he did not simply preach. He reminded, he revived, he reconnected people to what they already knew, but had pushed to the back of their minds. His prophethood wasn't about grand miracles or confrontations. It was about rebuilding the moral muscle of humanity. He taught them how to live with honesty, how to respect one another, how to control their desires, and how to keep their hearts aligned with what was right, even when the world made it difficult. Many listened because Idris spoke with a sincerity that felt undeniable. He was the kind of man whose presence alone made people question their wrongs. But not everyone welcomed his message. Some felt threatened by truth. Some preferred the comfort of corruption, and others simply didn't want anyone telling them how to live. Idris saw all these reactions, yet he remained steady, knowing that the path he walked was chosen for him long before he took his first breath. Knowledge and writing. As years passed, Idris became known not just as a prophet, but as one of the most intelligent men of his era. In a world where knowledge was scarce and writing was almost unknown, Idris stood as a pioneer, someone who understood that wisdom wasn't meant to stay locked inside a single mind. It was meant to be passed on, protected, and preserved for generations that would come long after him. People believed that Idris was the first human to write with a pen, and this gift changed everything. For the first time, ideas could travel, lessons could last, truth could be recorded instead of forgotten. Idris didn't treat knowledge like a treasure to be guarded. He treated it like light, meant to spread. He studied the patterns of the world around him, the movement of stars, the behavior of nature, the rise and fall of human character. Nothing escaped his attention. He observed, he learned, and then he taught with a clarity that made even the most complex truths feel simple. His words carried weight, not because of authority, but because people knew Idris spoke from a place of genuine understanding. He encouraged his people to think, to question, to seek wisdom instead of blindly following their desires or traditions. And in those early days of civilization, this was revolutionary. He taught them to measure, to count, to work with discipline. He introduced order where chaos had quietly settled in. For many, he was the teacher they never knew they needed, someone who didn't just speak about righteousness, but taught them how to live it in practical ways. Writing became one of his greatest tools. Through it, he documented guidance, recorded important messages, and preserved moral teachings that otherwise would have vanished as memories faded. His writings helped people understand accountability, purpose, and the importance of living with intention. He also taught them skills that improved their lives. Physically, how to make better tools, how to work more efficiently, how to live with a balance between effort and rest. His passion for knowledge wasn't academic, it was spiritual. Idris believed that learning was a form of worship, that the mind was a trust from God, and that using it was a responsibility. Whenever he taught, he did so with humility, always reminding his people that wisdom wasn't his own creation. It was a gift from the Creator, meant to guide mankind back to the path they were slowly losing. The call that stirred sleeping hearts. Idris knew that knowledge alone wasn't enough to save his people. Wisdom had to reach their hearts, not just their minds. And so began his true mission, calling his community back to righteousness, back to the values that once kept humanity pure. His voice wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, calm, and sincere. But sincerity has a power of its own. It can pierce places where force never will. And Idris's words began stirring hearts that had been asleep for years. He walked through villages, across fields, and into gatherings where people sat exchanging stories or complaints about life. Idris would listen first. He always listened. Only then would he speak, reminding them gently that every struggle, every moment of pain, every conflict between families all traced back to one thing: the human tendency to drift away from what is right. He told them that righteousness wasn't just praying or believing. It was honesty in business, kindness to neighbors, fairness in judgment, respect for parents, and discipline when desires pulled them toward harm. Some people felt hope just hearing him. They described him as someone whose presence made them want to be better. Others felt uncomfortable because his words exposed their hidden wrongs. But Idris never judged. He corrected with patience, guided with compassion, and advised with a firmness that came from genuine care. One of his greatest challenges was addressing corruption that had become normal. People lied so casually that they no longer felt guilt. They cheated in trades, breaking trust without a second thought. Families were divided by jealousy, greed, and ego. Idris spoke to these issues directly, telling them that a society only collapses when its moral backbone breaks. And theirs was already bending. His message was simple, but powerful. Return to the path of truth before it's too late. He would gather groups and teach them how righteousness isn't a burden but a protection. How living with integrity brings peace that no wealth can buy. He reminded them that God sees every action, every intention, every secret thought, even when people pretend otherwise. Day after day, he kept calling them with a determination that never faded. And though not everyone listened, the few who did began transforming from within. Their character improved, their families healed, and their actions became examples for others. Idris wasn't just preaching, he was rebuilding the soul of a generation. The darkness that surrounded him, as Idris continued spreading truth with patience and resilience. The world around him kept sinking deeper into corruption. It wasn't sudden, it was slow, like a shadow creeping across the land, darkening hearts one by one. People chased desires without shame, acted on impulses without restraint, and treated wrongdoing as entertainment. For Idris, watching this decay was painful not because he feared for himself, but because he feared what humanity was becoming. He would walk through markets and see dishonesty everywhere, scales rigged, deals manipulated, and arguments fueled by greed. He watched families fall apart because of jealousy and ego. He saw neighbors who once cared for one another become strangers, suspicious and cold. Worst of all, he saw people stop caring about their own souls. They lived only for the moment, blind to the cliff they were walking toward. Idris often stood at a distance, observing with a heavy heart. These weren't wicked people by nature, they were people who had allowed small wrongs to grow into habits. Habits had turned into lifestyles, and lifestyles had become the new normal. That, Idris knew, was the real danger when wrongdoing stops looking wrong. Some individuals disliked Idris simply because he spoke truth. His presence reminded them of the purity they had abandoned, and it made them uncomfortable. They whispered behind his back, rolled their eyes when he approached, and accused him of trying to control their lives. Others mocked him openly, calling him old-fashioned, claiming he didn't understand the new ways of living. But Idris remained calm. He wasn't shaken by insults or rejection. He understood that truth often feels like an enemy to those who prefer illusion. He continued doing what he was chosen to do, guiding, warning, teaching, hoping that even one heart might awaken before it was too late. Despite the resistance, Idris found strength in the small group of people who believed in him. These followers weren't perfect, but they were sincere. They struggled, they stumbled, but they kept trying to improve. Their effort gave Idris hope. He knew that even in a world drowning in corruption, a single righteous person could be a lantern in the darkness. Still, the spread of evil weighed on him. Every day felt like a battle not against people, but against the moral erosion eating away at society. Yet Idris never stepped back. He stood firm, knowing that his mission wasn't measured by how many listened, but by how faithfully he delivered the message. The journey beyond the earthly sky. There came a time in Idris's life when his devotion, his perseverance, and his unwavering obedience set the stage for something no human had ever experienced before, a journey beyond the earthly world. Idris had spent years guiding his people, standing firm against corruption, teaching knowledge, and living with a patience that felt almost otherworldly. And it was in those quiet moments of deep worship, when his heart was closest to his Creator, that the command for an extraordinary journey descended. Idris did not seek miracles. He sought closeness to God. Yet this closeness opened a path that few could even imagine. According to ancient narrations, Idris developed a special bond with one of the mighty angels, an angel who admired his faith, his discipline, and the sincerity with which he lived every word he preached. One day, Idris asked the angel for a humble request to help him draw even nearer to his Lord, to elevate his worship, to increase his good deeds. The angel, moved by Idris's purity, carried him upward through the skies, ascending, layer by layer, through realms unknown to mankind. This wasn't a journey of pride or display. It was a journey of devotion. Every level of the heavens radiated with a new kind of light, a new sense of purity, a calmness that Idris had never felt on earth. As they ascended, angels looked at him with respect, recognizing the man who had lived with such patience and righteousness in a world drowning in sin. When Idris reached a heavenly realm, a divine command was issued, one that would forever set him apart in human history. Idris was granted an elevated status, a station beyond the earthly life. Some narrations describe that Idris was taken into the heavens permanently, becoming one of the few human beings honored with such a rank. This journey wasn't about escape. It was about honor. Idris's mission on earth had been fulfilled. His endurance had been witnessed, His sincerity had been recorded. The heavens welcomed him not because he sought them, but because he earned them through a life of truth. For the people he left behind, Idris's ascent became a powerful reminder that righteousness doesn't end with this world. It rises, it is seen, it is rewarded in ways beyond imagination, where angels greeted him with honor as Idris ascended through the heavenly realms. Something extraordinary unfolded, something no human before him had witnessed. The angels, creations made of pure light, recognized him instantly. They knew of his patience, his teachings, and the battles he fought against the corruption of his time. And one by one, as Idris passed through each level of the heavens, the angels greeted him with a respect usually reserved for the most honored servants of God. Their greetings weren't loud or ceremonial. They were calm, warm, and filled with admiration. Angels do not flatter, nor do they exaggerate. They simply acknowledge truth when they see it. And in Idris, they saw a man who had lived his entire life with a sincerity that echoed through the universe. Some angels asked him about the struggles on earth, curious about the challenges humans faced. Idris answered with humility, explaining how desires distract people, how truth becomes uncomfortable for those who prefer comfort over discipline, and how righteousness requires constant struggle. The angels were amazed not because they didn't know human nature, but because Idris had risen above it in a way so few ever did. His discipline impressed them. His steadiness inspired them. His devotion reflected a level of worship that angels admired deeply. One angel remarked that Idris prayed like someone who could hear the footsteps of the hereafter approaching. Another noted that his patience wasn't ordinary. It was forged through trials that would have crushed weaker souls. Idris listened quietly, humbled by their words. He didn't see himself as special. He saw himself as a servant simply doing what God had asked him to do. That humility made the angels honor him even more. They knew arrogance destroys the heart, but Idris carried none. His journey upward wasn't fueled by pride. It was driven by love and obedience. In the higher realms, Idris met angels who guard knowledge, angels who record deeds, angels who protect creation, and angels who continuously praise their Lord. Each one recognized him, greeted him, and acknowledged the purity of his life's mission. These were encounters that would later echo through generations, stories told to remind humanity that angels respect those who live with integrity, even when the world around them chooses corruption. Idris's meeting with the angels became a symbol, a message to every believer who would come after him. Heaven sees every struggle. Heaven honors every sincere effort. And heaven welcomes those who remain faithful when it is hardest to be. Wisdom that echoed through generations, long after Idris ascended into the heavenly realms. His teachings continued to ripple through humanity like a steady, guiding current. People who had once ignored him now remembered his words with a new understanding. His lessons were simple, yet powerful, so powerful that they outlived entire generations. They formed the backbone of early civilization, shaping the character, ethics, and spiritual awareness of countless families who passed them on as treasures. Idris taught that knowledge without action is a burden, not a blessing. He reminded people that a wise person isn't the one who knows the most, but the one who lives what they know. His followers often recited something he used to say, A truthful life is the easiest life, and a dishonest life is the heaviest chain a person can carry. Those words stayed with them, steering them away from the small lies and silent wrongs that eventually destroy a person from the inside. He emphasized discipline, something rare in a world driven by impulses. Idris believed that the heart becomes stronger when the body learns restraint, and that the mind becomes clearer when the soul stays connected to its creator. His lessons weren't about rituals alone. They were about character. He taught people how to treat one another with fairness, how to speak gently even when frustrated, and how to forgive before anger hardens into hatred. One of his strongest messages was about responsibility. Idris taught that every person is accountable not just for what they do, but for what they allow within themselves. Laziness, arrogance, envy, dishonesty. He warned that these invisible flaws eventually become visible disasters, and the people who truly listened felt their lives transform. Families grew closer, communities became more peaceful, and daily life gained a sense of purpose. Idris's writings helped preserve these lessons. His recorded words spread far beyond his original community, reaching people he never met. They taught future generations how to build societies rooted in truth, justice, and compassion. Even those who didn't know his name felt the impact of his teachings woven into the moral fabric of early humanity. The beauty of Idris's message was its timelessness. It didn't belong to a specific era. It belonged to every heart searching for clarity. His wisdom became a lantern in the long corridor of history, guiding those who chose righteousness, reminding them that every good deed, every act of patience, every moment of honesty echoes far beyond its moment. The man whom heaven raised. Idris's story does not end like the stories of ordinary men. His life, his mission, and his unwavering devotion carved a path so pure that the heavens themselves honored him in a way reserved for only the most righteous. While many prophets completed their work and returned to the earth, Idris was granted something far greater: an elevated status, a place among the heavenly realms, a reward that reflected the depth of his sincerity. People often wondered why Idris received such an honor. The answer wasn't found in miracles or dramatic events. It was found in the quiet details of his life, the patience he lived with every single day, the discipline he never abandoned, the truth he carried even when it made him stand alone. Heaven raises those who rise above their desires, who fight the silent battles inside themselves. And Idris was the example of that victory. His elevation became a message that reached far beyond his time. It told humanity that righteousness is never ignored, that every sacrifice, every moment of self-control, every struggle to stay honest in a dishonest world is seen, counted, and rewarded. Idris's life reminded people that God's recognition doesn't come from fame, applause, or worldly success. It comes from the purity of one's heart and the sincerity of one's actions. For those who lived after him, Idris became a symbol of what it means to live with purpose. His name carried weight in ancient communities. Parents told their children about the prophet who wrote the first words, who taught people how to think, how to act with integrity, how to walk through a corrupt world without letting corruption touch their soul. They told them about the man whose patience became so beloved to the heavens, that the angels themselves honored him. Even today, across centuries, Idris's story remains alive. His teachings continue to inspire anyone who struggles to stay righteous in a world that makes it difficult. His life proves that greatness isn't measured by power, wealth, or recognition. It is measured by consistency, honesty, and devotion. And so, Idris remains not just a prophet of the past, but a beacon for every generation. A reminder that when a person chooses truth over comfort, discipline over desire, patience over anger, and faith over fear, heaven takes notice. Heaven lifts them. Heaven writes their name in honor. Idris was one of those names, the man whom heaven raised. The mighty people of Ad. Before the world knew the names of empires, before Rome, before Persia, before the pyramids became a global wonder, there existed a civilization so powerful, so advanced, and so terrifyingly confident in their own strength that ancient travelers whispered about them for centuries. They were called the people of Ad. Their kingdom wasn't built on soft land or weak soil. It rose out of the harsh Arabian desert, in a region known as Olakhof, a world of rolling sand dunes and blistering winds. And yet, these people thrived, not just survived, thrived. They engineered massive pillars that stood like mountains. Their homes were carved into cliffs and fortified with stone that looked impossible for a human to lift. Their warriors were giants in both muscle and reputation. Their rulers believed their greatness was unmatched on earth. If you were a traveler approaching their territory, the first thing you'd notice was scale. Everything was built big. Every structure was designed to impress, to intimidate, and to leave a message behind. We are the strongest people alive. The tribe of Ad had wealth. They had technology for their era. They had strength. And most dangerously, they had ego. Their daily life was a display of power, speed, architecture, agriculture, and trade routes stretching across deserts that other tribes were scared to cross. They harvested crops in what should have been dead land. Their water systems tunneled through sand like hidden rivers. To the outside world, the people of Ad looked unstoppable, untouchable, unbreakable. But inside their kingdom, something else was happening, a shift that every great civilization eventually faces. When power climbs to high, humility falls to low. And as their structures soared upward, their hearts drifted downward into arrogance, corruption, and a belief that no force on earth or in the heavens could challenge them. This is where the story of Prophet Idris begins. Not with miracles, not with confrontation, but with a man watching his nation drown in pride, and a storm silently gathering far beyond the horizon. Because history has proven one thing again and again. No matter how mighty a civilization becomes, there is always a limit, and there is always a warning before the fall. And for the people of Ad, that warning was about to arrive.